Hello, my name is Klint Macro. I'm an instructor and trainer here in the Pittsburgh area, and I do have the opportunity and pleasure to travel all around the country to teach people safety and defensive use of firearms. I'm also the second vice president of Firearms Owners Against Crime, and that's who this video is coming to you from. There are a whole lot of new gun owners since this recent panic has happened. The streets were lined up with folks in droves who were wanting to finally exercise their Second Amendment rights. And I say to all of you that have just bought a firearm or are new to firearms, welcome. It's a wonderful thing to be able to exercise your rights. One of the things that makes someone different from a gun owner to a responsible gun owner is someone that seeks out some knowledge and some training. So today I want to give you some basic safety knowledge, and by all means, after we're done being locked down in our homes, seek out a qualified instructor. There are many who are certified by the National Rifle Association, the United States Concealed Carry Association, and ICE Training, just to name a few organizations that offer fantastic classes that you can get into locally or all around the country. So what I wanted to speak about today is safety rules. Safety is paramount whenever we handle a firearm. It doesn't matter if you're using that firearm for righteous violence to defend your family or to shoot tin cans off your back porch if you have the ability to do that. Safety rules come in all different shapes and sizes. If you take the Game Commission Hunter Safety course, you're going to hear one set of rules. The NRA's rules that they use in their class are different from the ones that the USCCA uses. But let me say this about all of them. They all have the same outcome goal, which is the safe and proper use of the firearm. And they all touch upon four different concepts. One of them being the concept of a safe direction. The second rule goes around the concept of keeping your trigger finger away from the trigger until you're ready to shoot. And I'm going to explain more on that here in a moment. The third one revolves around ammunition, the proper and appropriate time to have ammunition near or inside of the firearm. And the last one that's covered in the ICE training courses and in the USCCA DSF program, one of my favorite classes to teach, revolves around personal responsibility. So let's get into some of these safety rules. The first rule, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. This rule is very similar to one you may have heard that goes like this. Do not point the gun at something you're not willing to destroy. Both of those mean exactly the same thing. I like the first one because, well, it's positive. It's actionable. It tells you, hey, do this instead of don't do that. A lot of times as human beings, if we're told not to do something, we envision what not to do. So right now I'm going to say, don't pick your nose. What are you envisioning right now? You're envisioning picking your nose. So always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, or as we say in the defensive classes, keep your gun pointed in a generally safe direction whenever possible. Because if you're in a dynamic critical incident in a crowded environment, the chance of you sweeping or flagging yourself or someone else is much higher than it would be, say, on a square range or at your sportsman's club where things are very controlled and regimented. A safe direction is pretty easy to figure out at a range. You've got a backstop that captures the projectile. So long as there are no people downrange, well, you can point the gun down there and it's not an issue. But in real life, in your home, in a 360-degree world, that's not always so easy to identify. For instance, those of you that hunt out in the woods, you put your rifle down towards the ground. That's generally a safe direction pretty much all the time until you put your foot in front of it. And then if your foot's in front of the muzzle, it's no longer a safe direction. So if I'm talking about defending my family against a bad guy, obviously if I'm using that firearm to defend myself against an attack, I'm not concerned about the bad guy as a safe direction. But if there were family members or innocent people behind that bad guy, well, that's no longer a generally safe direction. Well, maybe a lateral movement or some change in our trajectory might give us a better option. Now, another rule you may hear is know your target and what's beyond and around it. And I think that's kind of covered in that safe direction concept. But we have to know that whatever target that we are shooting at, well, if we miss or if the round goes through a bad guy, it may go down and hit somebody else. So you need to know what's in line with your target. If you take the Pennsylvania Game Commission Hunter Safety course, one of the reasons where people get hurt in the woods through gun-related accidents is someone is in the line of fire. Let's say you're defending your home. Well, if you're going to be, say, guarding that door over there, well, if I know behind that door is a child's room or a window that leads across the street to my neighbor's house, that's probably not a safe direction for me to be mounting a defense. The second rule, always keep your finger off of the trigger until you are ready to shoot. And I think ready to shoot, it's very important to recognize what that means. Ready to shoot means you positively identified your target and you have made the conscious decision to put a hole in it. And I think that applies to tin cans, that applies to pieces of paper, that applies to that bad guy that might be trying to harm you and your family. You have to positively identify that target and make the decision, yes, I, Klint Macro, I'm going to put a hole in that. And until that occurs, you shouldn't be touching your finger on the trigger. And I'll explain where you should keep your finger when handling the firearm in just a moment. The next one revolves around ammunition. The NRA says always keep the gun unloaded till ready to use. I think that's a great rule. But you have to keep in mind, use is something that might be different. Use doesn't always mean bang, 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 shooting the firearm. So if it is your hunting rifle, well, you wouldn't load it until you're in your tree stand or you're at your space where you're going to be doing your hunting. If it's your defensive tool and it's on your body, well, it might be very appropriate to have that gun loaded. Actually, if it's in your direct control and on your body as a tool of self-defense, I recommend that it is loaded and that it does have a round in the chamber. It might be staged in a secure box, like a combination box where you hit 3 buttons and the box opens up. It might be staged in that box next to your bed, being used as a tool of self-defense in case someone breaks into your house in the middle of the night. A little bit on that, if a gun is staged and loaded in a box being used as a tool of self-defense, I highly, highly recommend, it's actually a deal breaker in my book, that the trigger guard be covered. Keeping it in the holster would be just fine, or there are things called trigger tethers that we can attach to the gun that cover the trigger guard. The last rule is the big picture rule. And it's important to recognize and accept the great responsibility we have when we carry a firearm or use one. And it goes like this. Recognize that you are in control of a firearm. And if you use that firearm negligently or with malice, you have the potential to hurt or kill yourself or someone else. Keep in mind, it's not the object, it's the operator. So again, recognize that you are in control of a firearm. If you use that firearm negligently or carelessly or with malice, you have the potential to harm or kill yourself or somebody else. So remember that. Every time you pick up that firearm, take on that responsibility and act appropriately. So let's go over some basic safe handling. Right now I have this pistol, and this pistol is a SIRT pistol. This is a training gun and my camera is being operated remotely. So I'm going to point the gun in that direction. And again, this is a training gun. This can't go bang. There is no way this can go bang. It shoots a laser, and we use them to train with. They're a wonderful way to train. SIRT, shot indicating resetting trigger. So I said, what do you do with your finger when you're not touching the trigger? Well, here's a good thing. Always keep the finger above the trigger guard. As you can see, I can feel where the frame and the slide meet. That way I have a tactile place that I can touch consistently so I know where my finger is without having to look at the gun. So my finger is either here or it's on the trigger when I'm shooting. Now, why is this? It's very important. It's not just enough to keep your finger off of the trigger. A lot of times people just take their finger off the trigger and maybe an instructor will correct them on that and they wonder why my finger wasn't on the trigger. Well, you have to understand, under the stress of a dynamic critical incident or any type of startle, it's likely that if you're holding on to something, you're going to clench your hands. And if you're holding on to a gun, if you clench your hands, it's very likely that that finger will curl into the trigger guard area and touch the trigger. And of course, when we touch the trigger and press it, the gun's going to go bang. And we only want to do that when we know absolutely that that target is something that we want to put a hole into. Let's talk about dry fire. Dry fire and dry handling your gun is one way that we can train in the comfort of our own home, but there are some safety things that have to be implemented before we do this. And these are deal breakers. They must happen. First and foremost, you need to make sure that you have a good backstop. And even though we're dry firing, we're not going to put ammunition in the gun, but we have to set ourselves up. What would happen if? So you want to have a nice concrete wall, like maybe in your basement, or a fireplace sometimes works real well, or a wall that behind your house, maybe there's a backstop like a hillside. But if the gun were to go bang, we want to make sure that that projectile stays on the property. We want to purge the room of ammunition. We don't want there to be any ammunition present whatsoever when we are dry firing our guns, or dry handling them, or coming out of holsters. We're doing any dry work, dry meaning no ammo in the gun, when we're at home. You have to purge that room of ammunition. Make sure there is none present. Then you want to check that the gun is clear. So the first thing to do is picking it up, keeping it pointed in a safe direction. As I said, this camera is being run remotely. Now I'm not going to shoot at the camera with this gun, but I want you to see what I'm doing here. Make sure your finger stays in that spot high above the trigger guard. We're going to depress this magazine release right here. This piece right here. That magazine release generally can be actuated with your strong thumb. Press that button, and what that will allow to do is to remove the magazine. Always remove the magazine or the ammunition source first. Then I'm going to pull back on this slide while pushing up right here on this slide stop lever. Now every gun's a little different, but it's going to have something there that's a slide stop lever if it's semi-automatic. I'm going to reach up and over, and as I pull back, I'm going to push up on that button with my thumb like that. And now it's been locked. So as you can see, the gun is empty. Now here, let me get some flashlight in there. As you can see, the gun is empty. So we always want to do a visual check, but it's also prudent to do a pinky check. Do a physical check as well. Get into the habit of checking visually and physically every time we're making sure a gun is clear, or we're verifying that it's clear. And if at all possible, have someone do a secondary verification. My assistant is not with me right now, so I'm just going to have to do it on my own. But I've seen and I've touched, and I know that that gun is clear. So a clear gun, we still treat it with the same respect we would as if we knew it was loaded. But anytime you're handling guns, you need to know the condition of your firearm. I know this gun is clear. The AR-15, very popular rifle. I bet there was a ton of them sold just very recently in the last week here in Pennsylvania across the country. So what you want to do with this, the concepts are the same whenever we're going to check to make sure that it's clear. First off, we want to make sure it's pointed in a safe direction, which it is right now in my environment here. Now, I'm going to need to first remove the magazine. Now, I'm going to run this left-handed for the camera, but I'm going to flip it over so you can see the magazine release. The magazine release is right here. If I'm left-handed, I can use my support thumb and press that button. I can take the magazine out. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in my back pocket. Now, the mag is out. Now, much like the semi-automatic, whereas there I had to rack the slide and lock it open, here I need to rack the bolt. This piece right there. We want to pull the bolt back and lock it open. So there's a button right here, the bolt catch, bolt release. The top of it will release the bolt when the bolt is open. The bottom of it will lock the bolt open when we're pulling the charging handle back. So I'm going to press down on that. I'm going to press down on that while I pull back on the charging handle. If you can, put the butt of the gun into your bicep, or you can put it under your armpit if that works for you. So press on that while I pull back, it will lock open. This can kind of move on its own, but I recommend once the bolt locks open, you can close it. Now here, I'll bring this over here and you can see, and here I'll use my flashlight. We can see there's nothing in there. And very carefully, because I got big fingers, I'm going to go ahead and check the chamber. Now, when you check the chamber with an AR, make sure you're nowhere near that button, because if you touch that button, your finger's in there, it's going to make for an interesting afternoon and a painful evening. Now, right-handed, I can easily touch that magazine release button with my trigger finger. I'll put this on the table. Now I can put it into my bicep, pull back, my finger is above the trigger guard. Now I'm going to press on the bottom of that bolt catch, and then I'm going to pull back on the charging handle and it'll lock in place. Now we're clear. So that's how to check a gun clear, the AR-15. So the Glock works very much like most modern striker-fired semi-automatics, so the features on that are very similar. And with the AR, all ARs pretty much are the same. You may see slight variations, but as far as the procedure to check them clear, it's pretty much the same on any one that I've ever seen. Dry fire, we need to scour the room and make sure there is absolutely no live ammunition in the area, none whatsoever. Matter of fact, I recommend that you don't dry fire anywhere that you normally have ammo. So I wouldn't recommend dry firing in your reloading room or where you store your guns or your ammunition. Make absolutely clear and sure that there's no ammo in the gun. Visually and physically inspect the chamber and magazine area and have someone else, if you can, do a secondary verification of that firearm to make sure there's no ammo in it. But when you do then dry fire, well, there's lots of drills you can do. A good one is getting the gun to full extension and then having someone put a penny or something on the front of the gun and then press the trigger smoothly and continuously and do that without having the penny fall off. And you can make it a game and you can keep adding pennies and whoever makes it the furthest wins the pennies. That's something we used to do when we were kids. When you dry fire, again, have that good backstop that you're dry firing to. You know, some things you could do in dry fire is single presses. With a Glock like this, you're going to have to reset the striker in order for it to dry fire a second time. Another thing you do is working out of the holster. That's another good thing that you can do in dry fire. But I always recommend live fire if at all possible. It allows us to train in context. But if you're stuck at home and can't leave the house, or if you just don't have the money for ammo or range availability, well, dry fire, there's definite benefit to be had from doing dry fire at home in a safe manner. When you're done with your dry fire session, if you reload the firearm, I recommend putting the gun down, wait 10 minutes, and when you do finally put ammo back in the gun, and this seems kind of silly, and my wife has sometimes looked at me kind of funny when I've done this, but you say, "This gun is now loaded, this gun is now loaded, this gun is now loaded." You want to say that a couple times to disconnect your brain from the fact that you were just doing dry fire reps. Because once the gun is loaded, then it can go bang. So that's a very important thing that you need to do if you're going to be doing any dry fire or dry work with your firearm at home. Okay, so before I turn things around and we'll shoot at my target here with the non-lethal training ammo, let me show you how to prepare a magazine. We're going to put some ammunition into the magazine. Now, a magazine, a lot of times these get called clips. A clip is a thing. You may find a clip in an M1 Garand or an SKS. A clip is a piece of metal that holds ammunition together. A magazine houses ammunition and it's got a springy thing inside there. We call it the follower. That helps to push the ammunition up so as the gun cycles, it can put new rounds into the chamber of the gun. So this is a magazine. It houses the ammunition and it has a spring device that feeds it. So one of the challenges many new gun owners, new pistol owners have is prepping a magazine. So when you get a new magazine, this follower right here is tight. It's hard to do. Now I put my safety glasses on because I'm going to be working with this non-lethal training ammo. This is UTMs. We use these for non-lethal training. We wear a lot of protective gear and we scour the area, make sure there's no real ammunition or regular firearms in the training area, but we can use these for what's called force-on-force training or stress inoculation training. Today I'm going to use it because I can safely shoot this here at my facility and not go to the range because, well, I'm locked down right now. So let's take a look at this. So what you do is you press on the top of the follower with the round, press down and then slide it back. Now that's the first one. That's usually the easiest one to get in. So now the second one, you want to press down on the back of the cartridge while you press on the front, lay the cartridge case over the bullet or the projectile of the other round, press down, find that sweet spot and slide it back. Now this I have seen more people get frustrated on how to prep magazines than many of the things I've seen people get frustrated on the range when I'm teaching basic classes. Don't sweat it. This is something that you can do at home with dummy ammunition. Dummy ammunition is very inexpensive. If you get, say, 5 or 6 rounds of dummy ammunition, it's ammunition that's not ammunition. It's just usually plastic inside of a cartridge case. And you can practice loading, unloading. Later on, you can use it for malfunction clearances. Dummy ammo works really well, and it's something that every shooter should have in their range bag. So I'll go ahead and I'll put a few more in here. So if you have trouble with this, don't fret it. There's always going to be a technique that you can find. Now, a lot of guns have little helpers. They're little plastic things that clip over top of the magazine you can press down. If you have one of those and want to use it, cool, you can use that, that's fine. But ultimately you want to get rounds into the magazine so that we can begin to fire. As soon as you can, go to the range, practice, become confident in your ability to handle your firearm in a safe and prudent manner. I believe when they said well regulated in the Constitution, what they meant by that is that they expected the citizens to know how to use firearms, use them safely and efficiently. So I think it's our American duty to be well regulated with the firearms in the true sense of what that means. Now get to the range, but there's something you need to understand here in Pennsylvania. Because of the crisis that's going on, the governor has issued 2 state of emergencies actually. We've been in one for the opioid crisis and now we're in one for the COVID. What that means is there is no legal way to take a firearm, any firearm, off of your property without having a Pennsylvania license to carry. Now it's illegal to have a loaded shotgun or a loaded rifle in your car anyhow, even on a normal day. But keep in mind, if you take any firearm off of your personal property, go onto a public street, and you do not have a license to carry, you're committing a crime. So it's important that we know the law and we abide by it. And the laws that suck, we try and change them through the legislature. Firearms Owners Against Crime is a PAC group. We help to get pro-gun or pro-liberty people elected to office. That's our main mission. But one of our missions is also education. We educate elected officials on the law, we educate elected officials on guns, and we also educate the general public as well. So keep an eye on the website. We've got different seminars and educational opportunities that take place throughout the state, and they're usually hosted by one of our pro-liberty elected officials. It's very important that now that you got the gun, now that you bought some ammo, or maybe you're trying to find some ammo that they'll ship to Pennsylvania, once you get that gun, I think it's very important that you look into joining FOAC. We are a Pennsylvania state volunteer group. There are many other great national organizations, but FOAC is here. We're Pennsylvanians fighting for Pennsylvanians' rights. So www.foac-pac.org is our website. Check it out, tell a friend, and get involved. You can contact me, Kim Stolfer, our president, or any of the officers on board through the website, and you can be part of the team. So stay clean, keep your hands clean, wash them and sing happy birthday twice, use lots of real soap, and don't touch your face. And now you are armed, keep your eyes open, and become well regulated. My name is Klint Macro, Second Vice President of Firearms Owners Against Crime. Signing off.